Hello, I'm Mike Hilliard. When I was a lad, I was always making things, and so, on starting at secondary school, I was attracted to the crafts department, at that time offering woodwork and metalwork. After doing the basics in both, I chose woodwork and proceeded to make the usual pipe rack, etc., as depicted in this wonderful Giles cartoon, which I found stuck to the crafts department door. What a classic! I did O-level woodwork and made a cigarette box for my father. Rather a dubious present as we were trying to get him to give up smoking. And then a coffee table. Quite improbably, these have both survived. The coffee table doing service in my parents' house and subsequently in both of my daughters' houses. In the sixth form, I went for the sciences, but became disillusioned with chemistry and reverted to woodwork, where somewhat unusually I took A-level, my project for this being a large teak sofa. This again has survived from 1961 to 2002 at my parents' and then with my daughter Zoe. We reupholstered it in 2011, much needed, and it still soldiers on. My woodwork teacher was very keen that I should go on to a career in cabinet making, but in the event I chose electrical engineering and woodwork became my favourite hobby. When I married Mary and we got our own place, one of the first things I did was to build a workbench, this a hybrid of the woodwork and metalwork benches that we had at school. Here it is with my long foreplane, a gift from my father-in-law. An early project was the construction of loudspeaker cabinets. These handcrafted from oak boards rescued from a skip outside our local church. Lots of dovetails. I had help from our twin daughters. Oh dear, they're in their early 50s now. Over the years, I have accumulated a big collection of tools, many of them machine tools, and some of them home constructed. This IXL lathe, bought in kit form for a song and then restored and given a stand, proved very useful in making some of my other tools, as I equipped it with a vertical slide so that it could be a mill as well as a screw cutting lathe. This became the centre of another hobby, metalwork, actually closely linked to woodwork. For woodwork, here is my planer thicknesser. And here is my bandsaw, connected to the dust extractor. The latter can be connected to several machine tools. This is the Union Graduate lathe, and beside it to the left is my collection of bowl turning gouges. Above it is the collection of spindle turning gouges, calipers and centres. Here is the floor-standing pillar drill with an adjustable table that makes it very versatile. With the addition of a special yoke, it converts to a mortiser for making the sockets of a mortise and tenon joint. The yoke carries a square chisel, hollow to accommodate a special drill that removes the chips. I added a special slide modified to take cramps, which allows the work to be accurately positioned beneath the chisel and to move it step by step, plunging the chisel into the work at each step. In all these explanations, I have chosen not to cut wood, as sawdust and cameras do not mix happily. This is my router table, and it is a very versatile piece of kit. Another home build. The router can be mounted above or below the table. Here it is mounted above on a home-built stand and is operated by a bicycle cable mechanism using this pedal. Here a plunging cut can be made by pressing on the pedal. A pin in the base plate can be raised to engage with shapes on the underside of the workpiece enabling this to be mirrored above. A second table can fit over the first and has a fence attached. With the table clamped, work can be pushed against the fence to make crossway grooves. With the table free, but the work clamped to the table, longitudinal grooves can be made. The router head can be lifted to permit work of different thicknesses to be accommodated. The overhead stand can be removed and the router positioned beneath the table, and now, with the addition of a fence and pressure plates, longitudinal routing with a variety of moulding cutters can be done. The router's drop-in table can be removed and replaced by a circular saw drop-in table. The circular saw's height and angle are both adjustable. The front of the table can be replaced by a slide, allowing precision cutting of panels and of timber to length. It is versatile, permitting angles to be cut. This slide can also be used with the router installed. In addition to machine tools, I have a good collection of hand tools, including a few old traditional tools like adzes, draw knives and spokeshaves. I think that's enough on tools, and time to look at a few of the items constructed over the years. This traditional knock-down kitchen table was an early project using recycled church boarding. The top has been sanded and repolished a few times, but it's still going strong in our kitchen. These early projects long predated my router table, but I had the use of a well-equipped workshop at Harlow Tech, which boasted an overhead router table, a spindle moulder and a fantastic tenon. Another early project was this occasional or card table in ash and teak. It features rule joint folding leaves and gate-style supports. The latter were made using secret mitre double mortise and tenon joints. Also in early days, I built this corner cupboard in traditional panelled construction, this to house my Matty stereoscope and its cabinet of slide magazines. I made a pair of special moulding planes to edge the top. In the 1980s, our twin girls took up lace making, and I was called on to make lace bobbins and other ancillary devices. Here is a small selection from one of the lace making kits. The bobbins are about 4 inches long and are made in a variety of woods and patterns. Thread is wound around the slim top end and weight is added to the bottom end in the form of spangles, which are 6 glass beads on a wire ring. After buying an antique Windsor chair, I was inspired to make several items in the same idiom, the first being a Canterbury or magazine rack. This has an elm base and the rails, spindles and splats are in yew. Steaming the top rails using a homemade steaming kettle, then pegging them to a forming jig, was an interesting project. The central hubs on the wheel splats are in laburnum. Next came a stool, also in elm and yew, and with a hand-carved frieze around the edge of the seat. A matching coffee table followed, though I never found the time to execute the carved frieze on that. Turning the long stretcher on that table was a big challenge and required the construction of a ball-raced centre steady to fit the graduate lathe. This has proved to be a very useful accessory. This standard lamp, known in the family as the hairdryer, has illuminated Mary's corner of the lounge for many years. This is in yew and oak. I finished off the Windsor project with a tabletop book rack, essentially a pair of bookends with a linking base that allows their distance apart to be adjusted. This is almost entirely in yew, but the columns and links are in wenge. We extended our house by building a dining room on the side in the 1980s, and access to this was via an old side window converted to a 4-foot wide doorway. I chose to make an asymmetrical glazed double door in ash, having 3 sections visually and with 2 forming the larger door and 1 the smaller one. I used a reverse ogee arch shape as a major feature top and bottom. I made the brass door furniture on the dining room side and also made up special mini parliament hinges from commercial hinges to enable the doors to fold back past their frames. Making special brass work for my woodwork projects has been an ongoing theme. Back in the 1970s, I found an English dial clock mechanism, somewhat improbably lying in a puddle in the backyard of a junk shop. I had to rescue it. Eventually I got round to rebuilding the mechanism, which features a nice constant torque device called a fusee, and then I started to think about making a case for it. The case is in ash and mahogany and uses the same reverse ogee arch shape as in the dining room doors. This case features miniature woodwork, tricky curves, tiny brass parts to register the door to the case, and 3 brass catch mechanisms for the top, bottom and front doors. The front door, which supports the not inconsiderable weight of the mechanism, features mitres reinforced with secret brass inserts. This project was quite a challenge. In the early 1990s, we rebuilt our kitchen, replacing the old cabinets with new ones and building fielded panelled doors properly constructed with pegged mortise and tenon joints. This was a big project with no fewer than 11 matching doors and 8 drawer fronts to make, all with turned bun knob handles. For my brother and sister-in-law's 25th wedding anniversary, I turned an oak platter and decorated this with a fretted and carved Celtic knot pattern at its centre. The knot was backed with contrasting iroko. In my early days at work, I took to playing backgammon with a colleague and decided to make a board. This is in mahogany with a sycamore frame, and the interior marquetry is of ash veneer with the points alternately in teak and oak. The grain of the teak points is in the same direction as that of the ash, whilst that of the oak runs across. After completing her university degree course, my daughter Jen moved into a house in Warrington. She came home for Christmas armed with a wrought iron gate that she wanted to use as the head of a bed to be constructed in oak, and this to be installed in her house in Warrington. We had a great Christmas project, designing it, purchasing the oak, modifying and painting the gate, and me teaching Jen the rudiments of woodwork. She was a very capable young lady and soon mastered the intricacies of the machine tools. I'm sorry that these images are flatties. I always thought that the gate, whilst elegant, was rather uncomfortable. 26 years on, and Jen's son Louis has the bed, with a new, comfortable headboard. More recently, I undertook another bed project, this time a folding spare bed to stow beneath another divan. This was in beech to match the divan, and was another project where brass work was required to provide the hinge pins. Staying with the subject of brass, I had a commission from a good friend who lives by the Thames and has a rather nice launch, all mahogany and canopies. They wanted a table to fit into the floor of the launch, it to have 2 folding leaves and safe storage for 2 bottles of wine and 8 glasses. What a project! Fortunately, I still had the IXL lathe, which had a long enough bed to make the brass tubular legs, and I also had my Colchester Bantam lathe, which served to make many of the more precision brass parts. The timber was mahogany. The design was a challenge, but I think it came out well with folding end doors for the glass storage cupboards and a double catch to secure the leaves when folded. Brass gates supported the leaves when up, and mahogany donuts closed the bottle holes when not in use. Again, my apologies for the 2D images. I think it just remains to mention turning projects. I have made a lot of bowls and other treen over the years, and here are just a few items that are still with us. The large pieces are in Leyland cypress, spalted beech, normal beech and oak. Here we have kauri, yew, iroko, laburnum, yew again and crabapple, and at the front rosewood and burr maple. And here is my latest piece of turning, made to support 3 little planters whose support holes weren't quite central. This device makes them hang level. The base is burr elm and the shaft in yew. Well, I hope you've enjoyed seeing all this stuff. I certainly had fun making it.